Good evening.
Working correctly.
I was the one driving the Cubs tickets. Sorry. I don't even like the Cubs that much. Sorry. I'm a Sox fan. But my son and my wife are huge Cubs fans, so I was doing it for them. But I'm glad you got it.
And I'd like to talk to whoever won the Medina.
That's my both should have won these. So, all right. Well, thank you both for being here. I will just say that again. I will just own. I'm slightly nervous actually to be up here on stage with these two, who are amazing. Not only as doctors, but just as people. And they have been among the most welcoming people to me personally at this foundation, but in the IBD community are just incredible humans. And I feel like we have such a unique and special opportunity tonight to hear from them. So thank you both for being with us. We're going to have a conversation. We want you to hear more, what is the foundation doing? Why does the foundation matter? We want you to hear about some of the science that is happening and just what's happening to change people's lives. And then we want you to hear about the urgency and why it matters that you are here. So I will start by posing the question over to them. You heard me just a couple minutes ago talk about this cycle where patients drive what happens with research, right? Like their needs drive the research forward. But what does that mean for the foundation? Dr. Rubin, let's start with you, but how does the foundation work with you to make this happen for your patients? And what does the foundation mean for care?
All right, well, let me start with the fact that the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation is the only group in the world that includes professionals and patients together. There are many other professional organizations for scientists and doctors. There are many organizations that work with our patients and their family, but the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation here in the United States, and of course the Illinois chapter, is the only one that actually has both together. And to me, that has been critical in understanding what we should be doing. As somebody who has multiple family members with IBD, I have to tell you that the way we move the science forward is by understanding the people who live with these conditions and suffer from them. So a society, a foundation, an organization that brings everyone together for the same goals is the way to do it more effectively. And that's the way I've always looked at the foundation, and I'm grateful that you're all here tonight and that you're all giving lots of money tonight to support this fundraiser. Because what we're trying to do is to take the observations we make in the clinic and translate them into scientific advances that change the way those individuals live and the way the future of our field will look.
Yeah, and Dr. Wyborski, you move a lot of these projects that may not otherwise be funded forward. Talk to us a little bit. I started to introduce ventures, but talk to us about what is IBD Ventures and why does this science that is this but-for science, what does that mean and why is it important?
So IBD Ventures is an example of venture philanthropy. In the medical world, it was really started by the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and led to the first drug available for cystic fibrosis patients. What we attempt to do is to invest in companies that are bringing products to the market for IBD in therapeutics, diagnostics, devices, and digital health. And by investing in those companies at a critical point in their lifespan, we can help them bring their product to the market. And what it really does in terms of we're fulfilling two needs. One, we're helping the patients and hopefully easing their lives in one way or another. And the second is that since it is a true investment, we are looking to get a return on that, which would then come back into the foundation. So there's a monetary gain and there's a mission gain, and it's honestly, for me, it's like depending on the day you're talking to me, which is more important, but they're both very important. And people like Katie, a third of the people I work with at the foundation have Crohn's or colitis. And this is in my 25-year career in pharma, this is really the first time I've had daily interactions with people who have the disease I'm trying to heal. And it makes all the difference. And so when I think about from patient and clinic to product, it's working with people on a daily basis and involving them in what we do for IBD Ventures We have patients that help us review the applications that come in, and we listen to them. They're not just there, to kind of check a box. We listen to what they hear, and there's a lot of times they'll say, I would never use this, so why would you want to invest in it? So it's critical to hear that patient voice to help us make the right investments.
You guys both bring awesome perspectives to this and just speak to the need in such very compelling ways. So thank you. The foundation we're seeing, it's not just a funder, it's a catalyst, I think, to this change and these breakthroughs that we need. So I want us to dive in a little bit to the science. Dr. Rubin, a couple of things that we've chatted about recently include, IBD and mental health, what's happening in that space. And as well as you heard me start to introduce the idea of a biosensor that can be worn. What is that? What's happening in that? And how have you been involved in that? And what's going on in science?
There's a couple important things that I want to highlight that the foundation has supported, and also just to update this group of people who are here tonight to understand some of the advances that are occurring. Everyone who watches TV sees commercials about the new therapies that are available. You can't miss those. But what we really want to understand is the underlying drivers of these conditions, as well as the biology of the other parts of having Crohn's and colitis. It's been known for many, many decades that people who have Crohn's and colitis are more likely to have anxiety and depression. That is well described. What hasn't been understood is why that occurs. You may say, well, of course, it's a socially isolating condition and it's difficult to talk about, and who wouldn't be anxious or depressed with that particular challenge? But the actual biology of it has not been well described. So what our lab has been looking at is to better understand why this is happening at the fundamental biological level, and then to figure out how we can modify that. So by understanding it at a biological level, first of all, it removes some of the stigma of having a mental health challenge that's related to a chronic condition. But the second part of it is it yields a lot of information that we can use to understand how to treat people more effectively. When you understand that most of the neurotransmitters that regulate your emotions are coming from your gut and not from other parts of your body, it makes complete sense to understand that we should just be able to figure this out. But in order to do that, you have to do the right science. And fortunately, the foundation has invested in that in a variety of different ways, and we've been the recipient of one of their grants to support that work to help us understand it more. What that will lead to, of course, will be our ability to understand who's suffering beyond what we see in their GI symptoms, very importantly into other areas, but also then, of course, not only how to recognize it, but then how to treat it more effectively. From the biosensor point of view, I'm sure most here in the room understand and have seen the revolution that occurred with continuous glucose monitoring, right? People who can measure and monitor their blood sugar continuously and then be notified through an app and now interactive with delivery of insulin through a variety of technologies to control their blood sugars. Well, there's technology that's already being studied and is just around the corner that can reveal whether you're inflamed or not before you experience clinical symptoms. So imagine if you knew that your IBD was acting up before you felt it, through looking at your sleep behaviors and patterns, and through detection of some of the inflammatory proteins that are even expressed in your perspiration, in your sweat. Foundation has invested in that. Ventures has supported the work to look at that. So imagine if you were just wearing a small device that was not visible to others, that would alarm and alert you that your IBD was starting to act up way before you had a problem, before you got sick, before there was a consequence. That's what we're trying to do. So as much as we emphasize we want to cure these diseases, and I always bring that up as the first gap in our need for future work, we also want to understand how do we prevent complications and how do we change the natural history of these diseases so that people don't have problems and they don't feel it and they achieve and sustain control of their condition, and all the other problems that go along with IBD are are out of the way as well. And that's all part of the big picture. So the mission of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation that Katie outlined for you, cures, yes, plural, cures, and improving quality of life. There's no better way to improve quality of life than to eliminate symptoms, and there's no better way to eliminate symptoms than to prevent them from happening in the first place. And that's what all of this leads to, and that's the science that's going on, and that's the science the foundation has supported, not just through ventures, but through their other grant mechanisms, and a variety of ways that are very important.
And I think for the ventures part of the biosensor, it's a great example of what we can do, and it's a great win to this point. So initially the company that was developing this used foundation support to validate that the biomarkers that are important for IBD can be detected in the sweat. Once that was done, it became a very easy step to see this is a company we want to invest in. And there was a donor who was willing to help us with that and invest in the company. It's called License. I'll give them a free plug if everyone else wants it. But and so that money, that initial investment of $500,000, helped them to progress their technology to the point where it would be ready to get into a first clinical trial to validate a lot of what Dr. Rubin was saying. And they started that. And then probably a year and a half after that, in one of our conversations, we were talking to them because the people we invested, we maintain very good contact with. We always find out how they're doing, what else they need from us other than just cash. And they were saying, well, you know, it's going, but it's going pretty slowly. And so we looked inside and we decided we're going to invest in them again to help them get the clinical support that they needed to keep this going at a faster pace. That's what we do. We're helping accelerate the work that's being done. And as a result of this, the sensor is now in, Dr. Rubin's one of the clinical investigators as well in New York, and we're pretty hopeful that within, I'm just going to say a year. Is that right? Is that good for you? Because it's good for us. You know, we'll have the data to at least say, okay, in this number of patients, how does this work in real life, right? Does it really show what the levels are like? Can it help be predictive? Can we then take them to the next step? You know, without that investment by us, they would still be probably back 2.5 years from being where they are now. And we like to say that what we invest in is critical path. This is an example where it's totally clinical path. And we're hopeful, again, and I wear two hats, I'm hopeful from the patient perspective that this can now be closer to being a reality to help patients see their biomarkers literally, you know, by the minute, as well as then being successful in a business perspective to then bring more money back into the foundation, which we will then invest in the next company down the road. But it's the science that leads us to help decide what's the right investment.
So the backstory is that the foundation hosted a science conference where there were a number of people presenting, and the bioengineer, who's not an MD, who is not an IBD person, from Dallas, was sitting in the audience, and I was presenting work on Fitbits predicting flares. And she came up to me afterwards and she said, I've been having conversations with the foundation. We have a technology where we can detect inflammation in sweat. Can you help us understand who we should use that in? And that's where these relationships occur, and that's through the foundation. They were the mediator here. And as far as getting it done in a year, it emphasizes that this is urgent. We don't want to wait longer to get things to patients who need them. How many in the room would love a sweat sensor if we handed them out as we're leaving tonight? Right. I see that. Even those who don't have IBD would like to wear a sweat sensor. The next fad. But my lab group, some of them are sitting at my table over there. I wanted them here tonight so that they could sense the pressure and they'll go back and recruit more patients.
I'm surprised you let them out. That doesn't usually happen in academia.
But in all sincerity, this is how science happens. These are how advances happen. It's through networking, it's through understanding a need, and of course it's through bankrolling it, which is all part of what we do.
Can I say just one more thing? Our investment in license and in all the other companies we've invested in serves to help them get further investments from other kinds of VCs and companies like that. To this point, we've invested approximately $19 million into 27 companies. Those companies have raised an additional $800 million since our investment. I'm not saying this because of me, but there's no doubt. But there's no doubt, and what they tell us is that having us invest in them when they go to those next investors and they see Crohn's and colitis is invested, that makes the conversation much different than if they didn't have it.
Well, let me just explain the return on investment in a different way. Part of what I believe we need to do is invest in the future of people who are going to do what I do. And the foundation has, for its entire history, provided support for junior investigators, young people. And one of the projects that was funded by the foundation was for a student who started working with me when she was an undergrad at the University of Chicago, who got hooked on IBD, is now in medical school at Tulane, and her summer project from between her first and second year of medical school, funded by the foundation, was to look at various issues related to mental health and neurotransmitters in women that cycles with their menses. Now, the whole point of this is that cost the foundation a couple $1,000s, less than Cubs tickets. But the thing is that she got hooked on being in this field. That's all it takes. It's an investment in the future. Every dollar counts. I know I'm also talking fundraising, but that's what we're here for tonight. I just want to make it clear to you that you may think, gosh, $27 million investment in venture capital and catalyst funding of new companies. Not everyone here can do that, but every single dollar leads to these other investments led by the foundation in meaningful ways. And I guarantee you that that's how we're going to maintain and help to preserve a future of people who can take care of our patients and our family members who have these conditions and advance the science into the next generation. And I was waiting until the last question, but I'm going to say it now anyway. Everybody in this room knows that right now science, expertise, and federal funding for research is under fire and is being restricted. So it's more important than ever that we are working together with trusted organizations that can steward our dollars and our support to continue doing what we're doing and not be hindered by whatever else is happening unrelated to your political affiliations. So I think that's a really important point.
Dr. Wyborski, I want you to weigh in too on the sense of urgency and just, if you were to tell people in this room why does it matter and how they can be a part of actually igniting this process.
Well, I think why it matters, the people sitting out there know, right? The ceiling for therapeutics is typically 35%, right? In terms of a new therapeutic coming out, that means that a lot of the people don't respond, and so we're trying to drive new therapeutics and new mechanisms. It's not just anti-inflammatory, it's very different things. Fibrosis is a major issue for people with strictures. We're getting involved with the Cleveland Clinic and others in terms of looking at how can we address that, what companies, and we've already invested in a couple, what companies are really approaching that part of the disease from a different issue. And that's life-changing right there. Diagnostics, right? So the sensor is a diagnostic. There are other ways that we want to do so that when a patient comes into Dr. Rubin's office, he has a diagnostic or a biomarker set that say, this is the drug that would best work for this person. We've been talking about precision medicine for a long time, where we're getting closer, and it's getting to the point where that will help, and that will make a big change in terms of people's lives. The urgency in terms of funding, so we usually have an annual time when people submit proposals for us. The typical number we receive is around 50 per year. On September 17th was our deadline for 2025. We received 88. We typically get 5 from academics. We got 23. And that speaks to those, they're looking for funding. But even the companies where we typically get 30 to 35, we got over 55. So there's a huge need for the valuable companies, the best companies we want to fund, to be able to fund them. And if we don't fund them, that they may not get funded. Because there's not a VC out there that says, I'm going to invest in IBD. And so someone has to do it.
Well, thank you, both of you. You have shown us, I think, the value at a very quick level, I think, of science, of research, of why it matters that we push this forward together. So really appreciate you both giving your time and your expertise to this. You've also heard me say patients are at the center of what we do. So right now, I would ask you to turn your attention to the screens. You're going to hear directly from some of our patient community.